Now that's cute because I happened to come across my naturalization paper and my original name was Christel, Christel. Christel. I think it was Marie, Christel Marie, and then my last name, and so yeah, so. My mother, Carrie, changed it to Christa, and she would tell everybody, Christ with the A. That's why I do it sometimes. And so I changed the middle name to Carrie for her, because, I don't think my name would have sounded right. Christa Joseph Cooper, Christa Leroy Cooper. So that was my father's name. So I went with her name. Yeah. And so I loved Carrie, so I like to do CCW, now CCC.
Hi, my name is Ashley Walton. I'm a Christian, a wife, a mom to one amazing son, and a realtor with a master's degree in education. Yeah, life has taken some turns. Since becoming a mom in 2019, so much has changed. Some of it expected, a lot of it not. Life has been unfolding in ways I didn't plan, and honestly, I'm just trying to figure it all out. This podcast is a part of that journey. Sanctuary Conversations is a place and a space for honest, open dialogue about life, growth, and everything in between, rooted in faith, love, and connection. Here, I'll be sitting down with people from all walks of life to ask real questions and to have real conversations about how we're navigating this world. What's working, what's not, and where we're finding God in the middle of it all. So whether you're feeling grounded or you're in a season of change, you're welcome here. Let's figure it out together.
I was born in Germany, in a little village called Schwarzenfield. I don't remember much because I had parents who flew me on a big airplane when I was 6 years old. And when I came to Philadelphia from Germany, my mother, Carrie Pauline Watson Williams, picked me up. And then the first thing that happened that I can remember is I threw up all over her car. And she did not get angry. She just asked, what can I do to help you? And so as soon as we got to my new home, 5518 West Girard Avenue in West Philadelphia, I got a chance, I met my father there. And the first thing he did, and she did, they gave me a bath. Evidently, they wanted to make sure I was okay, that I had no broken bones. I did not speak English, I spoke German, and they were very patient. And I can remember that eating dinner, they were trying to say a few words in German, and so they said the word schnell, and schnell means fast. And so I would cover my plate, and I would take my fork and I would eat real fast. And I covered my plate because when I was in the orphanage, I wanted to make sure nobody touched my food, so I would cover it. And then the next event happened when I went to elementary school, and I had no problems in elementary school. Middle school, the kids would tease me and call me Hitler's daughter, and said, well, we think you're cute and we're going to fight you. But that never happened because God must have intervened. And then my parents brought over two brothers for me. Herbert came first, second, and then Peter came third. And we had a great childhood. Well, I had a great childhood. I can't speak for them. I don't know where my brother Peter is, but I pray for him. Herbert is deceased when Lexus was 16 years old. So yeah, he's been gone for quite a while. And so he lived in Philly, but he married all his wives out of St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. He must have loved that island. And anyhow, he has 3 children, two by his first wife, and I was in their wedding, and then he has one by his last wife. So I have not seen them, and I feel sort of sad because it'd been nice to at least get to see them once in a while. I went to a private high school called Palmer Memorial Institute in Sedalia, North Carolina. And I had great experience. It was co-ed, girls and boys. And during the time when I finished high school, when I was finishing high school, my father passed away. So that was sad. That made me question God then, asking why he took him at such an early age. When we lived in the city, we lived on one street, so we had a church on one corner and a bar on the next corner. And so I was always wondering why the Lord would take my daddy when they would be people who would be drinking at 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. So I struggled with that. But the Lord helped me through that as well. I did not go to my pastor, even though he and my daddy were good friends, and we went to his church. But I did not go to him, and he did not come and ask me how I felt. My mother was in her own grief, so she didn't say much, but because of God, and I didn't realize it then, but as I got older, I realized that God had intervened, and so he knew what I was going through. I went to, after I graduated from high school, for my graduation gift, I spent 6 weeks in France, and then after that, I was accepted to Bennett College in North Carolina, but it was an all-girls school. I was not ready for Bennett, so I just went there for a year, and then I came home, and I was taking classes at Temple University. That's when I met Roscoe, at Temple, when I was going to Temple. And I had a part-time job as a secretary at a high school in Philadelphia, and he was doing student teaching. That's how we met. He was doing student teaching at Bartram High School, and he had just finished Cheney, and so he came to me one day and asked me. He said hello, and then he told me his name, and then I told him I knew who he was, and I guess I impressed him by telling him who he was. So he asked me out for a date.
So did you have any trouble, or from your recollection, was it a hard transition coming from being in an orphanage to moving in with your parents? Did you have a hard time accepting?
No, I did not. I guess I was happy. No, because in an orphanage, there are a whole lot of girls in one dorm. And here I have my own room. I transitioned. Now the only barrier was the language, but I adapted very quickly. Kids and adults will help you when you can't speak. They'll say, well, why are you talking like this? Or, why do you have that accent? And we can't understand you. And so, yes, that was the major barrier, was the language. And of course, now at 77, I don't speak German, and I took French because at the time I was going to school, they didn't offer German. Now they offer everything. Language, a lot of schools now offer a lot of languages.
So also, you said that you went to high school in North Carolina?
Yes.
Was that a tough transition when your mom told you you'd be going to a private high school in another state?
No, because I had wanted to go, but no, I didn't. It was just for the 3 years of high school. Yeah, 10th, 11th, 12th, because I graduated at 12th grade. So no, it wasn't. I didn't have any problems, and it was all black. It was an all black high school, so I did not really mingle with white people. In fact, I've always I went to a black elementary school and a black middle school. So, I did not, in Philadelphia, I guess they had, it must have been a private elementary school, because I didn't encounter white people until went to Massachusetts, and, I didn't even see them that much in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And most of my mother's friends were all black.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Because I'm sure in Germany you saw nothing but white people. Well, a lot more white people, or German.
No, well, now you have to realize that I was in an orphanage where they put children who were of color, whose fathers were probably in the service and mothers were German. So we were all the same color.
Okay.
Except different browns, but
Yeah.
they put us all together in, and so basically when I did recognize, I could see, then we were all the same color.
So how did your relationship with your mom impact how you decided to parent when you became a mother?
My mother was a very quiet, my parents did not argue. Now, if they did, I never heard them. My father was quiet. My mother was more vocal. She took care of the business. She never yelled at us. She just said, I'm disappointed or I'm hurt. Now, I only got spanking twice in my whole life, and because I knew at 7, I didn't want people touching me, so I knew and I knew that if I did stuff, that might happen. Now, my brother that's deceased, Herbert, he would get a spanking every day.
Oh, man.
And I'd ask him one time, I said, why do you like somebody to hit you every day? Why do you do stuff and then you don't get away with it? I would think he'd change. I would think he would change and not do stuff to get caught. I said, so he would. Now, my other brother didn't. He just kept to himself. Peter kept to himself. But no, Herbert would do stuff. And then one time, my father came home and something had broken, and he asked who did it. And of course, all 3 of us denied it. And then he said, well, and that's when I got the spanking. And then, of course, during the spanking, Herbert confessed, which I didn't appreciate it because I had already been spanked one time. And then the other spanking was from my mother. That was the only time she ever spanked me. She had gone out to get her hair done or something, told me to stay home, and I decided to go out. And so as I was on my way back home, all of a sudden I heard a beep, and I turned around, and it was Carrie. And my mama, all she did was grin. So I said, oh, Lord. I don't think I said that word. I might have said something else, but it was, oh, Lord. And then when I got home, she didn't want an explanation. All she did was she spanked me. That was the only time she ever put her hands on me. Yeah. And so she was quiet, and all she had to do is look at you and say, I'm disappointed. And the way she said that would just hurt me more than, I would rather her hit me. Then I could get mad and say, she put her hands on me.
Yeah.
But words sometimes can hurt you more. Yeah.
So Alexis is your oldest child. Did you spank any of your children? Did you spank Alexis? Because she's your only girl.
Right. Very seldom. I think she might have gotten one, but no, I did not. No, I would take things. I would take things that she liked from her. I would not, and I'd say the same thing, that I was disappointed. But and Lexus didn't do that much to, for you to really hit her. The only thing that we crossed on sometime was her schoolwork. She didn't want. Now, one time, one of the members of Fish Street, who was a teacher, Ms. Esther Green, had asked me said, did you get Alexis' report card? And I said, No, I didn't. So then when I asked Alexa, she had withheld that. So I did spank her for that. But I mean, other than that, she just didn't like school but so much.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I mean, other than that, when she said she didn't want to do something, then I respected her wishes.
Being adopted and being, I guess you could say, given up by your birth parents, did that make you feel like you wanted to parent in a particular way? Did you feel drawn closer to your kids by that? Did you even think about it?
No, I really didn't. I mean, I thank the Lord for those who came together and gave birth that I came about, but I've never been interested in going back to Germany and finding out who they were, because I thought maybe they might be needy, and if that were the case, I did not know how I would react. But of course, being sitting under Big Roscoe and Rem Ingram and the church members, that, you know, that sometimes you have to be gracious and forgiving. And so I'm asking the Lord, if that time ever comes, that all of that wells up in me, and that I will be gracious and forgiving and merciful. But that time hasn't come yet.
So were you excited to become a mom?
Yeah, I was. I was until I went into labor. Then I was saying, Lord have mercy, what I get myself into. Now that was a kind of, and Lexus was born in Massachusetts, so she had a German doctor who delivered her, and so that was a different experience. But no, I did not regret it, especially after she was born. I thank God that it was over. I thanked him. And then I said, my mother came and helped, which was a big help. And so I learned how to, when she was up, I learned how to deal with her then. And as soon as she went to sleep, I'd take a nap. And now, you know, the first couple of years were kind of rough, because, you know, she's learning to walk and talk. And I remember one incident that I was in the kitchen. She always liked to come in the kitchen, and she always liked to cook and stuff. So she was near the stove, and I was telling her, I said, baby, don't get near the stove. And she came near the stove. And so I kept saying that, and then I said to myself, well, maybe I shouldn't say it anymore. So what I did is open the stove and the hot air, and she went, whoo! And so I never had to worry about her coming near the stove again, because I figured sometimes actions speak louder than words. So, you know, some things she learned that way. But usually all I had to do was talk to her.
So do you feel like there were differences in your kids?
Yes.
Well, we don't want to get to the youngest yet. So in the first two, were there major differences?
Yes, little Roscoe was much different. He was very active, and he was very talkative. He'd always say, Mama, why do I have to do this? Mama, why do I have to do this? So I would try to explain. And then the last thing I would say was, because I said so, baby. And so the way I said it, he understood it. So I did not spank him. He might have gotten one. I don't think his daddy spanked him either. But he was active. All I can say is he was very active.
So with the differences, Pastor often talks about the differences in the two households that you all grew up in, and your commitment to not yelling, not arguing, versus his experience with his parents arguing all the time. How did you all decide to create a new set of rules for your household in reference to how you were going to parent your children?
Well, we talked about it. I said, I came to the conclusion that I was not going to yell and scream. But I figured if Big Roscoe wanted to do that, that was fine. The Lord blessed me that I can tune all that out. I mean, I do it now. I did it with the kids. You can yell and scream all you want, and I just look at you. And so I always came to the conclusion that it takes two to argue. And then if one of you just looks at the other one either gets mad enough and they just stop arguing. I mean, unless, and never gets physical, because how do you get physical with somebody who doesn't argue back with you? I mean, physical comes when somebody yells at you because you're yelling at them, and you're all yelling at each other. And then the physical part comes because your hands get up and they start to wave. But if you look at them and they're going this way, how can they hit you? You're not saying anything.
So the next question is kind of a two-part question. Do you see motherhood as being a calling from God? And then the second part of that is explaining how you all came to adopt Chad, because I kind of feel like they go hand in hand if you do see motherhood as a calling.
I do. We had that choice that we could say, we didn't want children, but we had said early on in our marriage, like in the first 2 years of our marriage, that we were going to wait till, for 3 or 4 years. He was in seminary, and so we said we'd wait. And then we had said four kids. And so, of course, after Roscoe, I told him maybe we should reduce that to just 2 instead of 4. And we did. We decided 2 was enough. And so at Fish Street, there was she wasn't a member, but she was a neighbor across the street. And she had a grandson, and the daughter was not able to take care of the grandson. So she came over and asked if we would take her grandson. So we did. We took him, and then we took him for like a year. And then after the year, the mother would come and she'd take him, and then she'd come back. And so we just said, well, you just keep him. But she'd still call and say she needed stuff, so I would make sure that he got it. And so after that experience, she had another baby, which was Chad. And so the grandmother came over and said, after Chad was born, he had problems, he had some health issues, so he was at VCU for like 3 months after he was born. And she asked me, she came over and she asked and said, well, would you mind taking him in? Taking him when he gets out the hospital. Well, at that time, we were not foster parents, but one of our members was foster parent. So she got him. And then when she got him, then we applied. And then we got him. And so then we decided, after we had him it was before almost a year, that we wanted to go ahead and adopt him. So we formally adopted him. I mean, we got the lawyer, and then we never took anything from him. He was born in Henrico. And we never got any finances or anything, because we said he was just like Lexus and Roscoe. So yeah, we finalized it. We did the birth certificate, has just our names on it and everything. So we said he's a gift from God, And it's funny because we go to the grocery store with him, and his little friends would say, oh, Chad, you're with your grandparents. And he'd say, no, they're not my grandparents, they're my parents. He never said they're just old, because we were in our 40s when we had him. Yeah. So yeah, he was a joy. He had his ups and downs, but he was. When Big Roscoe had gotten sick one day, I was on my way to church, and I called Chad, and I said, now, your daddy's not feeling well. I'm on my way. You need to stay with him. If you have to go out, wait till I come, and then you stay with him. And sure enough, he had fallen into something, And he called, our next door neighbor happened to be home. So they both got him up. And then when I got there, we called the ambulance. So Chad was there. He never talked back. He might not like something because he was a quiet child, but he never talked. He never said, no. He'd just say, I'll do it, and then never do it. But I mean, he wasn't a mean child. So I thank God that none of my kids were mean. And he had his little issues. I never had to go to school, but one time, and that was with little Roscoe, I never had to go to school. If they were bullied, they never said anything to me, so we could talk about it. So they never, Lexa said she wasn't particular about school, she went, but I mean, that was the only thing. If Chad didn't like school, he never said anything. He just didn't bring home A's, all A's, so we knew how he felt about that.
Yeah. Did you all have a conversation with Chad at any point to let him know that he was adopted, or how did him finding out come about?
We told him. We told him when he was a teenager. We told him, and we also told him who his other siblings were, and we the phone numbers that we had, we gave to him, so we had no problem. We told him before his other grandmother died. But he did not visit her as such. When, he didn't have a need to do that. When he was 18 years old, I think his birth mother was killed in Church Hill. So Roscoe did it was a graveside. So I was sick, so I went, but I had to stay in the car with Chad. And so Roscoe did the graveside. He was 18 months old, and he never asked, and I showed him the clippings about, what had happened to her, and then he's got an older brother and two sisters, and so one of them was here, he would reach out to both of them, but they didn't want to be bothered, the girls didn't, and now Sean, the oldest one, he did. He reached out. They kept in touch, and so I was glad about that. And then on his mother's side, he had one uncle. Well, he's deceased now, but he never reached out to him. And so I told him, if you wanted them to come visit, or if you want me to take you, but he was driving by the time he, found out all this. Yeah,
so did he know a lot about your story and how you, were adopted and how you got to be with your parents? Mm-hmm. Did that conversation, you sharing your story with him, do you think that eased maybe some of what could have been a frustrating situation? Because you hear a lot of adoption stories and how people hold in, a lot of resentment, and it seems like neither one of you had resentment, but more so just an attitude of gratefulness about your situation. So do you think your perspective on it kind of influenced how he saw it?
I thought so. I really thought so. I think because he never said anything negative. Like I said, he didn't talk but so much, and but I think it did. I think it, because before he died, he was still living with us. He was not interested in leaving. So, it wasn't like he wanted to go out into the world, and he was right there.
Well, since you introduced the next topic in reference to Chad being deceased, how did you feel when that happened? And I know we've referenced motherhood as being a gift from God. So how did you kind of cope with that? Because not often does a mother have to say that they buried a child.
Right.
And I can't imagine that to be something that's easy.
Yeah, because I know what my mother went through when my brother died, because it took a lot out of her, because, parents always want to, let their children bury them. I mean, I'm no different. So, and it was devastating because you just never, I had spoken to him that day because I his room was downstairs and I was getting ready to go out. So I always said, good morning, have a great day, I love you, I'll see you later. And so coming home to that was, just unbelievable. But then having like you came over and some of our young people came over and they just, and so y'all just surrounded us with love that, because the reality is that when situations happen like that, there's nothing you can do. But your attitude does play a part in it. And when you have supportive people around you, it's much easier to get over the hurts. And so, now I do not go where he was, where the young man hit him. I do not go down that way. I know that I should, but I don't. I go around it. So, I still don't do that yet. So, but other than that, every time I go down to the basement, I see his room, and of course I look in the closet to make sure nothing's growing in the room. And so, and so I have good memories. So I miss him basically every day, because I remember when he first started driving, he had a little book. He said, Mama, I've got to drive in the rain. I've got to drive at nighttime. I've got to drive during the day. I've got to do all this and put it down in the book. Well, when Lexus and them went, I don't think they had to do that, but Chad had to do that. And so many nights on Wednesday, when it was dark, he would drive, and then when it would rain, I was just praying to the Lord that we'd be all right, because it was raining and new driver, but he was anxious. Now, all three of the kids were anxious to drive. I have never wanted to drive. I still don't want to drive, but they all wanted. Chad was no different. He wanted, and he liked old cars, so he found a way. We never had to, he never went to his daddy to ask him for money for an old car. He always worked a job to get enough to get an old car and then tinker with it. Now, he liked to work with his hands, whereas the other two were more thinkers. They did not like to work with their hands. And one thing that was funny, Chad was in the garage. Chad had a gorgeous voice. He also could play the piano and instruments. When he was about 3 years old, he would put his ear, if he heard something, he would put his ear on the keys, and then he would go ahead with his hands and then get it. And I asked him one day in the garage when he was older, I said, baby, why didn't you ever really pursue and become like a world-renowned musician? And it was real funny what he said to me. He said, Mama, I don't want to do that because I didn't want to get caught up in that lifestyle. So I didn't, what could I say? I wanted to say, well, son, some of the stuff you're doing now, you're poor. You've got, that was a shock when he said he didn't want to live that lifestyle. But no, he was happy. He was a happy-go-lucky person.
So what advice would you give to any mom who, well, not just a mother, but any person who's been adopted or they're struggling with adoption in reference to they've already adopted a child and there may be some tensions there? What advice would you give to them?
Well, first of all, I would say that those who have been adopted, thank God, think about it. If you really think about it, thank God. Now, I say if you want to search for the birth people and all that, I think you should do that. I don't think, I said, now, unless, whatever you find, you'll have to deal with. But I think if you really want to know everything, then you ought to go search. But I thank God every day that, that how my situation came about. The persons who adopt children, and I think that you ought to tell them. I think the sooner you tell them at age 6 or 5, 6, 7, if they understand or begin to tell them, I think you ought to tell them then. Don't wait till somebody tells them or says something, and I think they should know. And you have conversations, how do you feel? Here's why I want to adopt you. I either couldn't have children. I was either, like in my parents' age, they were too old to adopt. So they had a friend who adopted children from Germany. So that's how we came. Mm-hmm. They couldn't adopt in Pennsylvania like they can now. They considered them too old. My father was a doctor, so it was not financial. Yeah. A lot of times they'll say, well, you don't make enough money to have, so both, so that wasn't the issue for them. It was their age. It was their age that they were too old to have children, to adopt them. And so they went another route.
Yeah.
And so when they told me this, and I knew that, and they showed me the lady's picture, and they introduced me by mail to the lady that lived in Germany that helped adopt me, and I thanked her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I say, thank God, because if it hadn't been for God intervening and other people, it wasn't just my parents, but the people who helped them. Mm-hmm. I thank God for them as well. And let me just say that my mother had a friend and her husband who couldn't have children. So they adopted little Asian. They were Asian black.
Okay.
Yeah, two sisters. They, in fact, we grew up together. So yeah, they adopted in Philadelphia. They adopted them.
And then the last question is, what advice would you give to a grieving mother, someone who unexpectedly lost a child? Because I don't know if you elaborated on it or not, but Chad died in a car accident. Like you said, that morning you had spoken to him, you never would have imagined that
Coming home,
what was going to happen. Yeah, and so when you find yourself in that situation as a mother, you already talked about how hard and how devastating it is, but what advice would you give them to get through it, and how should they still continue to parent their other children given this newfound grief?
Well, I think one thing is that you need to have support system. If you're not in a church, you need to have people around you at that time. And I think you need to talk about it. I think you need to cry. Whatever emotions you have, you need to let it out. But I think you need to talk about it, because if you just pretend that it didn't happen or you keep silent, then all that builds within you. But we had people that we could talk to, and then go to people that have had that experience, and then tell them how you feel. And see, in our case, Lexus and Roscoe were grown, because Chad was like 11 years younger. So they were grown, so, and if you have other children, then you need to talk with them, because they're feeling a loss too. And they might not be able to, if they're younger, explain it. So, you need to really talk. And if you don't have the support system, talk to a counselor. Find, whatever, if you're in the city, see what counseling services are available. Or go to a church. Talk to, if you're Baptist, go to a Baptist church and talk. If you're Catholic, go to the priest. If you're Methodist, go to the Methodist. So, but you do. Yeah. You need to talk, and you need to surround yourself with people that care about you. Now, and it's terrible when you don't have anybody to talk to or care about you. That was lucky for us. We had a whole congregation. And then, of course, we had certain people. And so I didn't mind people coming back and forth. And like some people say they don't want anybody, they want it be private. No, I don't want to be private, And then the people bought, one person came and said, well, we know people are going to bring you stuff, but it might not be healthy. So here's some healthy stuff. I said, thank you. And so that was different. So when other people came, I put the healthy stuff out because I figured they need to be healthy too. Yeah. So getting through it, I didn't have to do it by myself. Big Roscoe didn't have to do it by himself, and Alexis and Roscoe the Third didn't have to do it. We all did it together, and with the help of his church was very supportive, and our church.
Okay.
Super.
And I know I said that was the last question, but you always talk about your name being Christ with an A.
Yes.
Did your parents in Germany name you, or did your parents here name you?
That's cute, because I happened to come across my naturalization paper and my original name was Christel, Chrisstel, Christel. I think it was Marie, Christel Marie, and then my last name. And so, yeah, my mother, Carrie, changed it to Christa, and she would tell everybody Christ with the A. That's why I do it sometimes. And so I changed the middle name to Carrie for her, because I don't think my name would have sounded right. Christa Joseph Cooper. Christa Leroy Cooper. So that was my father's name. So I went with her name. Yeah. And so I loved Carrie. So I like to do CCW, now CCC.
I like it. Well, thank you so much for this interview, and I always enjoy hearing your story, Aunt Christa.
Oh, and I always love hearing yours too.
Thank you.